'Twas the month before Halloween, and all was a quiver, as Instagram bulged with makeup to shiver. Painted skulls born from a makeup case, then did appear the zipper face, the monstrous beast whose logic defies a likely reason for coke can in eyes, placed scissor upon an eyeball's lid, to fish for likes the influencer did. Yet to say other than platitudes many and great would seem to be as trolling bait. Avoid the placing of glass on skin, reject out of hand another's chagrin. The mountain of wax to hold it fast, avoiding the safer prosthetics to cast. Look to see the designs you'll discover. Listen ye now to battles with bits of rubber.
I will start just by saying the Colin Farrell penguin makeup, which looked pretty cool to me.
Agreed.
For the new The Batman movie, and I believe it's Mike Marino that designed it, who has done a whole ton of fucking awesome stuff.
Oh yeah, Colin Farrell is
really
completely unrecognizable.
Well, yeah, but it's a nice, realistic looking character makeup. I mean, I don't know anything of the story of this story to know, I'm sure it'll make sense because like we were saying, like it doesn't look very penguiny, but that's, within the context of the story, maybe they're not going with that kind of literal, Danny DeVito thing, which looked cool, but
it really reminds me of a rougher around the edges characterization of actor Richard Kind.
Yes. Yeah. I would agree with it. And who was amazing in Spin City, if you remember that show.
Funny actor.
Very, very cool. So there's that. So the two things I really want to talk about is, I guess they're a bit with the cat plastic business. I want to talk about what I've seen on some forums where people are posting pictures of flat molds, particularly, and I've noticed there's varying degrees of distance between where the sculpt finishes and a cutting edge, if one has been done, begins. Because I'm of the opinion that you don't want a lot of distance between the two, and I have my reasons for that, which we'll get into.
I agree with you there, but I see a lot of inconsistency where it might be 4 or 5 millimeters wide around part of the prosthetic, and then might be get to be close to an inch around on the other side. At least make it consistent.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, I remember I think it was Daniel Parker that kind of showed me how he done his cutting edges, and it really stayed with me that his cutting edges are basically they mimic the shape of the sculpt precisely. So that you track around the outside very, very you follow it exactly, at a prescribed distance. And I kind of got into the habit of doing it quite tight. And I think with foam latex, you would maybe go a little bit tighter because you would have flashing that would remain, but you didn't want the piece to extend out too far into the face.
No.
And with silicone, there is obviously a reasonable argument to be made for where you're going to dissolve away the acetone or alcohol. You're going to dissolve away some of your cat plastic barrier, so it's not as crucial in a way. But I don't think, especially for flat molds, I don't think you need it to be too far away. I think I'm of the opinion that if you do a flat mold, I personally would do my cutting edge about 3 millimeters away from the edge of the sculpt. That's where my cutting edge would be. And I would do a cutting edge. I know some people don't like doing cutting edges or they have alternatives, but I still, in the main, like to do a cutting edge.
Oh, I do too, especially with the encapsulated pieces, because you can use the flashing as a handle basically to make sure that you get positioned right. And if you remove the flashing before you put it on, you got to stand a good chance of that edge flopping over on itself and sticking. And then you've got to try to fix that, which can cascade into a clusterfuck real easy.
A hot mess. Yeah. So absolutely you would want that. And also for transporting, you can pin it through there. And I know you could use the cat plastic as that, but here's the thing. It's a very specific example, but if you were going to do a piece where it had to finish below the eyebrow and above the upper eyelid's eyelashes, so it's a swollen eyepiece, so it's a very specific distance, and that can't vary a few millimeters each time. So you'd want that, that the size of that piece prescribed in the sculpture, in the cutting edge. So each piece that comes out has that on it. And then that way there's no way of you straying into the hair. Now, I know you could make pieces with massive amounts of cat plastic and then dissolve them off. But if you know you're going to dissolve them off, why the fuck would you put them there in the first place? Because especially with
just a waste of cat plastic.
Well, yeah, it's a waste, but it's also a waste of mold. So if you've got, like, using the rule of pi, do you know what I mean? If you have, a wound that measures 2 inches in diameter, that's a lot of cutting edge. You're looking at about 6 inches of cutting edge. So to go out another half an inch is probably going to add another sort of 100 grams of silicone on your mold. So it means your mold is much bigger than it needs to be. And then every piece you get out of it will also be massive. And here's the thing. With silicone molds, when you scrape them at the back, so you've sprayed your cat plastic in or you brushed your cat plastic in, that's dried, you pour in your silicone, you scrape off the excess. The act of scraping sufficiently will compress the silicone mold. And
a lot of times,
yeah, and if the silicone is very soft, then it will compress more than if it's a hard silicone. So you're going to easily be able to have a bigger cutting edge distance between where the silicone finishes and where the cat plastic finishes just by how much pressure you put in the mold. And you may want to do that deliberately if you've got a wound that's healing, for example. So you've got a cut that's in reduced thickness, so it's the same sculpt but it's slightly less filled. You could deliberately scrape it out, but it just means that you're going to end up with a bigger amount of cat plastic as a perimeter than you originally sculpted. So that's why I would start with something as close as 3 mil, because I know it's going to get bigger than that when I scrape it.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to start with it half an inch away, because then it's going to be, you'll end up with the piece more flashing than there is piece. And then if you're going to melt it away anyway. And here's the thing, if you stick it down and your silicone is the good color, you might not actually be able to see where your silicone is. So you may end up straying accidentally into the silicone when you're melting away your edge, which again, I don't tend to do. When I melt my edges away, I melt away. I'm separating the flashing from the cat plastic. I'm not dissolving all of the cat plastic away. I want the cat plastic to be there. I just don't want my flashing to be there. So hopefully that will make sense.
Yeah, it's melt away closer to the flashing than to the piece.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'll put some pickies up on the blog post to go with that, to kind of show what we mean. And then people will be like, what are we talking about? So there's that. And then the other thing, which is a bit of a weird one, is we did something for the crown a couple of years ago, and they didn't use it. They didn't not use it because it was shit. They didn't use it because they changed the story and the character wasn't in it really. So his thing that we did for it, you don't really see in it at all, which was a shame. But it was a couple of days filming, and there was a really, really nice thing on his hands and wrists. So you got a lot of, the wrist is moves a lot, the fingers move a lot. So there's a lot of mobility in the hand. And then what was happening is in between the fingers near the knuckles, it actually detached. It was a big, thick piece because it was like a big swelling. And it detached, and what it was really was that the cap plastic was still stuck to the hand, but the silicone on the back had separated away, so it basically delaminated halfway through the day. So you had to rip the back open to get in there to apply silicone glue to stick it back down. So what I did was, when I ran my other pieces, I ran them as normal. I needed the cap plastic on the core to be able to get it out of the mold, but I purposefully removed the cat plastic from the back of the hand in order to have bare silicone there, and then that bare silicone I stuck down to the skin with Telesis, and then it worked great. And then we had no delaminating problems.
Or did you melt it?
Melted off, yeah. I used cotton pads with acetone and just melted it away in prescribed areas, and it worked fine. It was great. So I was using silicone glue anyway. So that was an effective thing, but it got me thinking about some examples of when you might not want cat plastic on the back of your piece at all. It was prompted by someone on a forum today in the 911.
Yeah.
I was asking about it. I thought, oh, that's a really good point, because if there was a way of not having cat plastic on the back, actually, I think you'd have a better result.
Well, one advantage of not having cat plastic on the back is if you're deadening your silicone enough, if it's really, really soft, it's going to be really sticky. And you have an option of possibly not even needing to use adhesive to lay the piece down, and then you can essentially, it could be a reusable piece if the edges haven't been fucked up.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if it's sticky enough to stay on the skin, it's getting out the mold. But you know what we used to do before? It was the cat plastic was.
If it's a flat mold, getting it out of the mold is going to be easy because you've got cat plastic on the front.
Yeah, you just grab a hold of the cat plastic and peel it out.
Right.
Because what I remember what we used to do with when we used A and B, straight silicone A and B with gel 10, was you'd stipple the A and B on the surface of the mold and the core. But what we would use as a release agent was like watered down dishwashing detergent. So you'd stipple on a few layers of that and dry it. Then stipple your A and B on, assemble your mold and inject it. And then when the piece came out, how you would get the mold open was you would undo all the bolts, because it was fiberglass molds bolted together.
Right.
Then you would immerse the fiberglass molds in a massive tub of water for like 10 minutes. And then what would happen is the water would then creep in, reactivate the soap on the surface of the mold of the core, and you would slide your piece out underwater. Yeah. But it wasn't a particularly sticky surface because it was silicone surface, but it was a pure A and B. So the deadened silicone that you'd injected in the mold bonded very well to the skin, which was silicone A and B. And then because you were using soap, you'd basically remove it underwater. And because of their fiberglass molds and cores, they weren't affected by moisture. Yeah. Because fiberglass was pretty much the standard material that we use all the time. Certainly with foam.
They make boats out of it.
They make boats out, exactly. But we tended to not use much plaster here in the same way that I know in the States everyone has. I think we've been through this before. It's because I think the gypsum here isn't as good. So, and we have a lot of water around the island, so there's a lot of boats building. So
you just got to make sure you rinse the piece to get all the soap off. And
yeah, exactly right.
It works great. I've done that before.
Yeah, so I'm thinking you could do that. You could put KY jelly on a core and dry that, or you could use soap or whatever, and then basically don't spray cat plastic on the core. Just spray it onto the mold, get your piece out, and then when the piece is out, immerse it in water and get it out. I think the only problem might be some cat plastics go cloudy when they get wet. So I think it might be the IPA cat plastic doesn't, and maybe the acetone one does. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a thought. It got me thinking, how easy that would be to do. So I feel like I should try and do that at some point. But there's typically not much of a reason to not put cat plastic on the back, other than, like you were saying, it sticks better to the skin than it does the piece. So when you're removing it, you find you think you've got the piece off, and then you see the cat plastic stuck still down.
And then that's a pain to have to remove.
Yeah, it is. So I mean, I used to always spray cat plastic on the back of my flat molds all the time, because we have on record when we recorded our glue, the first episode of the podcast, 4 or 5 years ago, when, we were saying, you got to put cat plastic on the back if you want to use Prosade. But I think you can sort of use Prosade if the back of the piece is sticky, like you're saying, because it's tacky enough. But the other thing is, I think the silicone needs to be soft enough. If the piece is sufficiently deadened, not only will it be tacky enough, but also it will move well to the skin.
Yeah, so it's not won't run the risk of peeling off because it's too firm.
Exactly right. Yeah, because if the piece can't stretch as much as the skin is stretching, then that's when you find it sticks peels off, and it's not the fault of the glue; it's the fact the piece is too stiff to begin with. So
another disadvantage of doing cat plastic across the back is if you've put in the sufficient number of layers in the negative for the front, 6 layers, 8 layers, however it is, depending on how thin you've sprayed it, putting several more layers across the back is going to increase the thickness of your flashing, making it that much more difficult to melt invisibly.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. That. Yeah, you end up, like you say, with a much, much thicker edge. I mean, I guess you could do fewer layers on the front, knowing you're going to do that on the edge, but you want that thickness on the front to be able to handle the piece. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because it's very hard to spray the center of the piece and avoid accumulating extra layers on the edge. And
I'm sure there are some people talented enough out there who could do it. I don't count myself among them.
But I was saying about how I always used to spray cat plastic on the back of my flat pieces just out of habit. And then I think it was Neil Gorton that on a forum that mentioned he hadn't, and I was quizzing him on it. And I tried it and was like, oh my God, I'm never going to put cat plastic on the back of my pieces again. Or the flat pieces anyway. It's so much easier to not have to deal with that, because I've noticed if you spray cat plastic into a mold and let it dry, you can pour your silicone in that, and liquid silicone will bond to cured cat plastic. But if the silicone has dried overnight, if it's cured overnight, and then you spray your cat plastic on the back, there's a good chance that the liquid cat plastic doesn't bond to the cured silicone.
Yeah, unless you use something like a light misting of the 3M 77 spray cement or some thin Telesis, which you can actually, I think you can actually use Telesis thinner as a primer. Could work, or you can use this stuff called Pro Bond primer.
Yes, that would be a good alternative. That'll stick like shit to a blank.
That would work. That'll stick really well. I mean, I've actually glued lids that I keep the Pro Bond in. These Nalgene bottles. If you get a little of the Pro Bond on the threads and close the lid without wiping it off, and let it dry, you can have a hell of a time sometimes getting that lid off.
Oh, that's good. Even without any silicone being involved, it still bonds that well.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's good to know. So that would do the thing. But so when you're spraying the cat plastic on the back of the piece, you kind of have to time it right. You can't let the silicone completely cure. You have to get it just as it's setting, I think.
Right.
Just as it's set, which may be like an hour-long window where you've got to stay with it. And it's quite nice to be able to, fill your mold, scrape it, and then just walk away. I tend to do those things last thing at night. So
have a good digital timer so you can do something else instead of having to babysit it for an hour.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. You got to do it at a time. It's one of those things. If you've done it, you can't just leave it. Or you could spray it, but you'd have to spray it in the time, and you're going to resent sitting there just doing that. But once you've got that sprayed, it should be fine. But I tend to not do it now. I tend to use just a silicone glue on the back, and then it sticks well. But the other thing, what was the other thing?
What do you do in terms of transporting the piece? Since it's got an open, sticky back, how do you prevent cat hair and lint and dust particles from getting caught in it?
I tend to do what I do with my Prozaid adhesive pieces. I tend to just powder them when they're dry, and then wipe all that away when I'm ready to use it.
That makes sense.
So that it works very well with Pro Bondo pieces. Actually, this is a good point, because I'm not sure if this is a UK US thing. This might be an interesting one. But do you guys apply like Pro Bondo pieces or PTM pieces direct from the mold much, or is it always done as like a transfer onto acetate and then into the paper?
I haven't been brave enough to try doing it straight out of the mold yet,
because I think that happens a lot over in the UK.
Yeah,
more so than the paper stuff, I think. But the trick is to use a softer silicone. So we use something like 7315, which is a little more pliable.
Yeah, was it like a 20 Shore?
It's a 15 Shore. Yeah.
15.
So yeah, and it's nice and kind of almost water clear. It's very, very fluid. It's got like a 3 or 4 hour set at kind of average room temperature. You don't have to rush with it. You can degas it if you want. But it bends around the contours of the face much nicer than a stiffer silicone. So that in that instance, I think if you're doing Prozaid transfers, I personally think a softer silicone is nicer.
What do you use as a release in the mold?
Well, I've been using DAB, which is the PTM stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
But the other thing I've done as an absolute guarantee is I will spray in green marble. into the mold first as a kind of a temporary seal. Then I put the prosade stuff in. Sometimes if it's got a lot of detail, I'll just put liquid prosade in first.
Matthew Mungle uses his sealer.
Do you know what? His sealer will probably be even better, actually. I would, maybe go with that. But I'll tell you what I was doing. So I put the
so he doesn't even freeze them. He just sprays in his sealer, puts the Pro Bondo in, scrapes it off, and just lets it air dry.
Okay.
Rather than freezing it.
Okay, so you can either freeze it or not, but the beauty is you don't then have to transfer it from the mold. And I think a lot of this is from the fact that because you and I make molds, and if we need to make 10 molds or duplicate it, we can do that very easily. Then if I know I've got to run 10 sets, I don't feel the need to transfer it to paper because I can just make 10 molds. I don't need to reuse that mold another 9 times. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So there's no imperative for me to make that mold vacant. But also, I will. If I was putting in green marble in the mold first, letting that dry or blow dry it. Then I would put in a little bit of prosade to catch all the fine detail if there was really fine detail. Let that dry. Then I would scrape it with PTM and then freeze it. And then take it out of the mold and let it dry. It might take a week to dry. You know what that stuff's like. It can take a long time to dry. And then when you're ready to use it, you could transfer it. One of the ways I transported it was I put the molds, prosade side up in a pizza box. I arranged them in this pizza box and I mixed up a slow setting urethane resin and poured it around the molds.
Oh.
And let that set. And then in the morning, the molds are not shifting. And then when you're done, you can put the mold back in exactly the right hole. So it holds it the right shape. But it means you know which ones you've used and which ones you haven't. If you've got to refill them, it's quite nice to know which ones they go back in the same place.
I really like that. I've got a bunch of pizza boxes that I use for exactly the same purpose, but I'll have to try that.
Yeah, it worked out really well.
When you put the green marble in, do you spray it or do you stipple it in?
Oh, I was stippling it in. That's what I meant to say. I was stippling it in. And then what would happen is when you applied the piece, inevitably, the green marble didn't flex like the silicone would flex. So what would happen is you'd peel it out and you'd have all these flaky bits of green marble. But then I just spritz it with IPA alcohol and move that around with a sponge. And it would just break down and disappear. But what it did was it gave you a layer of something that definitely would prevent the Pro Bondo from sticking to the molds. Because I've had instances where even though silicone should release everything, if it's a fresh mold particularly, you might find that you've run a mold, it's only 6 hours old, you fill it with Pro Bondo and you leave it for a week. So it's had glue in there more time than it's not had glue in it. And there is a danger where it just kind of sticks. So by putting something physical as a barrier between the two, something that you can break down with alcohol, it pretty much guarantees it will come out. I would do that as well as the dab as well. And also you get the Hyro slip stuff that you can add to your silicone so that it, as a material, it's more releasey. Because I've noticed, as I'm sure you have, that the platinum silicones tend to be much drier silicones. There's not any oil that leaches out of them. So as a result, they tend to be less releasey. Whereas the tin molds give it up easy. So, but you're not really supposed to put it on skin.
Smooth On has I'm totally spacing on the name of it. It's like the Hyro slip, that you can put in the silicone. It's
the hair.
It's the release. You can use that in the same way you use dab in a mold to release it. Okay. It works fine.
Shit, that's going to bug me now. I've got some in the cupboard. I know exactly what you mean. It's the stuff you add to the body.
Yeah, hang on. I've got to go get the bottle. It's driving me nuts. I'll be right back.
So we'll be back shortly after this minor interlude of music. Stuff is called
hyperfolic.
Hyperfolic. There we go. Thank you. That would have irritated the crap out of me. I was the same though. I've got something I can remember. So you could put something like that in the mold first to to try. I guess you could try. I have done in the past on budget stuff. Was try baby oil, a little bit of baby oil, but I wouldn't use more than about 10%.
Yeah,
because it leaches out the mold like a bastard. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you want stuff to come out of the mold.
Mineral oil also might work.
Yeah, maybe could try that. But it's one of those weird. Oil. Yeah, it's one of those weird things where you'd think it would not stick. Sorry, that it would come out easy, but curiously sometimes it does bond. And yet, if you had a piece that was a bit stiff that was pure silicone, and you try to glue it on with Prozaid, you'd find the Prozaid would peel right off. It's annoying, isn't it? But that is one of those curious things about silicone. I mean, the notion of making pieces
things you only learn after having done it for a while.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
It's somewhat counterintuitive.
So I was thinking about some of the things that I've learned since the last time we spoke. I've been using my Photon S printer. I sculpted up some teeth for a makeup I'm doing. And I wanted to make
those
the
look really good.
Thanks, man. I wanted to make the teeth look real, and I also figured that sculpting them manually would take longer. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time sculpting them in ZBrush. And I think in about 2 hours, I sculpted about 5 or 6 different shapes of fang and tooth. And then obviously you then just flip it. So you've got a left and a right. And then I printed them on my Photon S, which took like 3 hours to do a complete set of teeth, like 12 teeth, 6 different pairs. And then I did another set that I printed, and in the slicer software, I just changed the scale on some of the teeth. So I made some bigger, some smaller, and then printed another set. So basically within about 7 hours, I sculpted, a set of teeth and printed out 2 different versions, and I had 24 different teeth, in immaculate detail within, half a day. And I'm like, that is a very efficient use of time. And I felt very good.
And while that's printing, you can be doing something else.
Yeah, while it's printing, I'm doing something else. Yeah, exactly. I was eating dinner while the second set was running. So it was like the first time where I'd really used something for something that I would have otherwise have done another way. And then basically what I did with the teeth, the time consuming thing was, here's the thing, I want to have these teeth in the makeup. So what I did was I took those resin prints. They didn't need much in the way of sanding. They needed a tiny bit of finishing on some of them. And then what I did was I glued a wire to the tip of each tooth to make it in a riser. And then I molded them in a block of silicone and then basically sliced them to get them out. And then the idea was I would then take those teeth back and use the hard teeth I'd printed as teeth shapes in the sculpt. So the gums would go around the teeth bases, assigned, each tooth a specific point. And then I'm going to put some hard silicone into the silicone mold I've made of the teeth so that I can actually cast out some semi-rigid teeth in silicone. So they're going to be nice tooth color. They can be translucent. I can paint them, but I can then stick them into the finished silicone appliance, which will be skin color or gum color. And so, do you know what I mean? They'll be the right kind of look. And
Very nice.
She won't be able to bite her face accidentally because the teeth aren't hard. So, but they're harder than the piece, so they'll look like real teeth. So
awesome.
So I was really pleased with that.
How do you like the resin printer?
Well, I went for the longest time hating it because everything I was printing was going wrong, and I found on a forum where I was going wrong. It was because I was overexposing too much. I thought that 5 to 8 seconds was optimum per layer. So there's me like an idiot going, well, I'm sure 30 seconds would be even better. So I would, each layer I put on for 30 seconds and you just leave it running overnight. What do I care if it's 4 hours or 6 hours? And then it turned out that basically, obviously, the length of time the light was spilling out and fusing. So fine detail was merging. So I changed it to, 5 seconds, and suddenly all these prints were coming out crystal clean and in like a third of the time. It was brilliant. So that was really good fun. So I've started really enjoying it.
Well, I've got a resin printer coming.
Yes, you said. Which brand is it?
It's Frozen. It's coming from China.
Nice.
My Chinese pals. It's called Frozen 4K Mini. Mm-hmm. It's got a pretty nice build size. The detail on it is sick. Prints I've seen coming off of it. But I won't have it for a while yet. It's toward the end of November is when it's going to ship.
Okay.
So maybe I'll have it in time for Christmas. Who knows?
Well, that'd be nice. Well, I just invested in a little curing chamber for post curing, because I think because of the rapid speed you want the layers to go, it kind of comes out a little bit gummy or a little bit tacky. So you can put it in this post cure chamber to kind of blast it with UV. So yeah, I'm going to figure out more, but I'm just trying to figure out what I can do with it, because I want to make some molds with it, but I don't necessarily.
Rod Maxwell's the guy to talk to.
Well, yeah, he's been doing some amazing things where he fitted one nose over another, didn't he?
He's been doing stuff with a scanner and doing age progressions from different life scans he's had done of himself over the years, and being able to transition from young Rod to old Rod, which it's pretty crazy.
Well, it seems like he's doing something that not anyone else has done, like that. He took that one nose and then stuck it on another nose and then made it into an appliance, then printed the molds, and all that's quite exciting. Yeah. So I don't have
a really neat piece for the 3rd edition of my book, but he has advanced so much since that contribution. We should probably get a hold of him and have a little squadcast conversation.
I think that'd be a great idea. I think we need to track him down and get talking to him, because I think he seems to be at the vanguard of getting this done. Him and Kazu seem to be doing some really interesting things with scanning and fitting. And see, the trouble with the scanning business is there's the stereolithography stuff, which is good, but it's the scanning, the handheld scanners. They're just so expensive. Like the good ones are shockingly expensive, like 25,000, 30,000. And it's like, I would love one of those. And I guess eventually they'll come down in price, like everything. The first cameras are pretty expensive, but it's just like, it's a game changer, because this is a thing for me, is using a 3D printer to print something that is going to fit a person exactly. That's where there's a bit of a weirdness with regards to scale, like how you scale stuff up, because by and large scale doesn't seem like CAD is good. Like if I do something in Fusion and I specify it's 36 millimeters wide in Fusion, then that's what it's transferred to the print. But it's very hard to know, like to mimic and replicate curvatures of a cheekbone, for example, and expect it to be right. And you can do it to some degree very successfully in life casts and stuff. But as you'll know, you get distortions with life casts. The weight of the material pushes down on the face and changes it. And it's now in a rigid material looking.
It's the scale thing distorted. That I think is probably where ZBrush needs to up their game, because you can scan something and you get it its scale is the variable.
Yes.
That needs to be addressed both with the handheld scanners and in ZBrush if you want something to be truly life size.
Yes. Because it's just taking shape, isn't it? And typically for most digital sculpts, if it's just a sculpture, it doesn't really matter the scale. You just need to know, like if you're going to print an object, you just may need to know the width of the door so you can get it in, or the height of the ceiling. Right. And so long as you those are pretty basic parameters. But to replicate curvatures of one thing and to have them marry up on the other side exactly, that's a different kettle of fish, and that's something where I guess you do need that level of accuracy, which might be beyond most pockets, because that's a hefty sum. But maybe in 10 years it won't be. Maybe in 10 years it'll be bog standard. It's just always the new stuff that comes out that tends to be, who would have known that drones would be a thing 20 years ago,
right?
And they would have been ferociously expensive, and now they're
or us being able to have a real-time conversation with video several thousand miles away from each other.
Yeah, exactly. So, it all comes around. But I want to play with that stuff, because it feels like you should know the software, even if you're not going to produce anything extensive with it. So there was that. Now, there's another podcast I wanted to mention to you. It's a filmmaking podcast, and I got in touch with the guy. I was so impressed. Yeah. It's called, tell you who it was. It was Kiana Freakmo Jones who put me onto this. Yeah, she told me about this. It's the podcast is called Red Carpet Rookies, and it's done by a guy called Mike Battle. And episode number 5, which I'll put a link to this on here, is with Bill Corso. And he is talking about his digital makeup company in this episode. And it's a really, really fucking good episode. So I strongly recommend you check that out. I will send you the link. But it's a really interesting one because I've heard a lot about his company, but I've not heard him speak specifically about it. And it's really interesting because he's talking about how, you know, when things get done digitally, it is the digital department doing it. They're not makeup artists making makeup decisions. And so he kind of took that as a kind of a thing where maybe makeup artists should be doing stuff digitally so that when digital corrections happen, it's done by somebody that actually knows, you know, what a Marcel wave is or what lipstick should look like in the 20s, or do you know what I mean? So you actually have some kind of informed hand behind it, which is a brilliant idea. So it's a good episode. I will put that up. But it's a really nice, I got in touch with the guy because I've really enjoyed the episode. I've listened to a couple and they're fantastic. And it's just, you know, another guy, he just really cares about the subject and is putting a lot of effort into disseminating useful information, and he's getting some really good guests on there, like production designers and costume people and all sorts. So I would recommend that. Red Carpet Rookies, it's called. So that was a good one. So yeah, I've enjoyed my 3D printer. That was good. I haven't used much more of the PLA printers, but I have to say that the plastic that you recommended to me was fantastic.
Yeah, Polymaker is the shit.
Yeah, and they have like a little marker on the spool to let you know how much is left weight wise, which is really useful.
Yeah,
which I like that. Yeah, so that's what I've been up to. So that's cool. I don't really know if I've got anything else more to waffle about, but maybe that's enough
for now.
But I want to do another one later in the week.
I discovered something today that. I happened to notice it by seeing one of the behind-the-scenes photos by a couple of the hosts who were doing the after party for this book fest yesterday. That they had one of them had a DSLR set up in front of her computer monitor, using it as the camera for the Zoom cast that we did yesterday evening. I said, then there's got to be a way I can hook up my M50 to the computer and use that. Have a nice 4K camera with different lenses, and it works. All you got to do is download this EOS webcam utility from the Canon website, install it, and you can use your camera, use the M50. We can both use our M50s just by hooking up a USB cable.
That's fantastic. Then I will try that. Yeah, you sent me the link. I've downloaded it, but I didn't want to connect it now. But I'm going to have a little play with that. That could make classes. So I did a couple of online tutorial things, and often when you're trying to show somebody in close up, what happens is I film it on my M50 separately so that I actually have some high def footage I can show them later, because otherwise you're stuck at the whatever bandwidth your viewer is observing you on. So to actually have a good camera connected to that would be great.
That could be a game changer.
I think so, because I can't get very close to this. This is an old webcam I've got, and webcams are not amazing cameras typically. So you know, that would be a really handy, useful thing to do, which is cool.
Cool beans.
So yeah, I've been, it's been a busy old time, and I've done, you know, a couple of these jobs. Again, I can't really talk about them, but one of them you know about because I've been showing you the progress of one, but the other things have been a bit, you know, hush hush. However, once I've got clearance on those, I'll reveal all. But yeah, it's been great fun doing the teeth and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think our viewers, those who haven't given up on us, will love seeing that.
I hope so. And I do apologize.
It's a cool sculpt.
Yeah, man. I do apologize for the length of delay. It's been one of those things where life becomes so all-consuming, or the jobs. Like I had a 3-week teaching stint where I was teaching. I was out of the house like 12 hours a day, and it was just like, it's just not possible. Plus running another job at the same time and having Zoom meetings late in the evening, and there wasn't any time. I wasn't realistic to be able to sit and record. It was horrific. So,
well, it's good that you've got stuff going on.
Yeah, it is nice.
You get to stay in your house.
Yeah, but I like to do this. I mean, I really, really enjoy doing these podcasts, and I'd hate for anyone to think that when it's not happening, it's because we can't be asked doing it, and it is not that at all. Because we've got guests lined up, we've got plans to do lots of things, and I think this next couple of weeks, I haven't much going on. We can do a few more.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. I got half term. The kids are off school. It's how shit is this? You got Halloween on Saturday. It's a full moon. The kids are off school all week, and like, it's COVID lockdown time, so like no one can go anywhere or do anything. Is that just the shittiest Halloween
I
ever?
haven't been able to figure out if I should be expecting trick-or-treaters in our neighborhood or not. I'm probably gonna do something anyway.
Yeah.
And if nobody comes to the door, then I'll have plenty of candy to fatten me up for a long, cold winter ahead.
And you get to do a fun makeup anyway.
Yeah.
So
which is always interesting. I did a 2-day Zoom class with the Denver School of the Arts this week with 7th and 8th graders in their theater program, and we did a wounds and zombie makeup, and I was showing them some old school techniques because they all got the little Ben Nye theater kit that they get a little tin of nose and scar wax, and they get some spirit gum, and they get a smattering of things to work with. So I was showing them things that they could do their out of the kit stuff with, including using cotton and tissue, 1-ply tissue paper. Mm-hmm. So I showed them how to do a wax cut, which they really liked, and you can get some really good results with wax for some things, as you know. And then I did a buildup of cotton and tissue to, building up the around the zygomatic bone and doing all that stuff. Well, I'm blind as a bat without my glasses up close, and trying to glue this stuff on my face while looking at a blur on the monitor in front of me, in my iPad, had to be comical.
Oh,
but it honestly didn't turn out too shitty.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
But it was tough. I managed not to poke myself in the eye with a glue brush. That was a plus.
That's and you'll be able to use your M50 for get your Canon nice close-ups, get some good footage.
Yeah. Now that I know I can.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, that's cool. So, hey, this makeup I've been sculpting on and off over the last couple of weeks that I did the teeth for. I was trying to get into the Halloween mood, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of factual stuff, and I thought I need to listen to some more novels. So I listened in the last couple of weeks. I listened to Salem's Lot, and I listened to The Exorcist, which, if you have Audible, I strongly recommend you get The Exorcist. It's fucking amazing. William Peter Blatty reads it.
He reads it? Cool.
He reads it, but he does a great job of reading it. Not every author should read their work necessarily because they're not good speakers, though. But it was amazing. I love to
listen to Neil Gaiman read his stuff.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's got a good voice. And again, they know the material well enough to know what to emphasize and what not to. Because if they're performers as well, that would be good. I mean, I listened to the Salem's Lot one. I listened to Stephen King did an intro, and he explained about the origins of the book and where, how he kind of came up with it and all this kind of stuff. And he was good to hear his voice, but I wouldn't want him to read the book.
No.
Nothing against him. It was just like, yeah. But the guy that read it was fantastic. But it was a really good week. It reminds me of the time in the same couple of weeks I read I Am Legend followed by Day of the Triffids, and that was like that left me a little bit shell shocked for a while. So I had the same thing with this. It was like vampires.
Yeah, you don't want to go around turning off any lights. You just want to leave everything in the house turned on. Exactly.
There was a bit of that going on. Have you watched on Netflix? Have you watched the Haunting of Bly Manor?
No.
That's quite good fun. It's kind of like not really a follow-on, but it's a very similar kind of. It's the same production people, I think. A lot of the same actors from the Haunting on Hill House.
Oh, okay.
Which was quite fun. There's some interesting accents in there, but it was cool. So there was some really spooky shit in that too. So that was that was fun. So yeah, I just got my spook on. I thought if I'm not going to have parties or we're not allowed people around, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to try and fix up somewhere else. So yeah, I've been getting into my horror.
The boys like the scary stuff?
Well, sort of. I mean, I like the whole being afraid thing, and so does Jamie, but the others not so much. So it's one of those things where I have to try and. I can't, like, no one's going to watch, and I really want my kids to watch The Exorcist anyway. I mean, aside from the horror stuff, there's some pretty vicious stuff in there that I'm not prepared to discuss with a 13-year-old. but the atmosphere of the books are really, really good, because obviously the production, like TV, like Salem's Lot, the TV show, scared the shit out of me. The David Soul and that movie with the Reggie Nelder Barlow. Mate, that scared the living crap out of me, and it still gives me, like, when it's creeping up, when he sort of opens the cell door and goes in and all that kind of stuff. It's still
The Exorcist still gets me.
Oh, it's terrifying. I mean, it's really scary to me. I mean, I know people maybe watch it and laugh now, but I take it on its word, kind of thing, and you just let it.
When I saw The Exorcist in the theaters when it first came out in 1971, I think. Mm-hmm. People literally were running, screaming out of the theater. Yeah, nobody had ever seen anything like that.
No, it's terrifying. And the book is unsettling. I mean, I think that's the thing. It's unsettling.
The Amityville Horror was an unsettling book for me.
I haven't read that.
That one bothered me quite a bit.
Maybe I'll listen to that one next, because that was another one of those movies that I saw the movie. The original one, not long after
the movie the movie didn't unsettle me as much as the book did.
No. Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, I watched it when I was quite young, so for me, it was more about the sort of visuals. You know what I mean? It was all the flies and the voice saying "get out" and all that shit.
Yeah.
That I lapped that up. But now when I read, like when I was listening to, I say read, but when it was read to me, The Exorcist and things, there was so many like subplots in it and things which are really creepy now as an adult, which add to it. So the demonic possession stuff was what we all sort of know and you've seen a lot of, but there's a ton of other stuff in it that's really, just really gripping, good suspense, and it builds and builds and builds.
You can get away with that stuff in the novel, but you can't put it in the movie because it's not really advancing the story. So they've got to cut that stuff. Otherwise, you're going to have a 6.5 hour movie.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to write that down. So, Amityville, any other good horror books that you've read that you think are worth the time?
Oh, well, The Stand is a favorite of mine.
Okay, I've seen the TV version. The one that Steve Johnson did makeup.
Yeah,
it was a good story, as I recall. I don't remember.
Well, they shot it. They shot a lot of that here.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Because a great deal of it takes place in Colorado.
Oh, right. Not all in Maine this time.
Yeah, no, but The Stand is a terrific book.
Fantastic.
Cujo is also a great book because you get inside the dog's head, and it's really hard to portray those thoughts on film.
Okay.
When you're really inside the dog's head in the book.
I didn't realize that was perspective, because I remember thinking, I've not seen Cujo. It's one of those things that maybe makes not a great movie. Like Christine, it's like, well, how scary is a fucking car? But I guess if you see it from the car's point of view, maybe, I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, no. Cujo, I thought the movie was pretty good, but the book will get you.
Oh, okay.
You're in the dog's head.
Wow. Okay.
You're seeing everything. You're seeing everything through the dog's eyes.
Amazing. Well, I mean,
as he's going mad.
Oh, okay. Well, if anybody is listening has some fantastic horror book recommendations that you think would make or good audiobooks, let me know. I'm all about that.
Well, we'll talk about it later in the week.
Yes, ma'am. We will indeed. We'll chat maybe Thursday, Friday.
Cool.
All right, buddy.
Good.
Have a good day.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else, and help us grow by sharing it on social media.